Hi everybody, greetings to you all. My eldest son says to me on Sunday, I hope you've realized by now that most of your subscribers probably think you're dead. Hey? Oh, that was very embarrassing for me. Yeah, so I've got to apologize, and I did check back and I see it's been some rather considerable time since we met on this channel. So please forgive me. I know I make the same old excuses over and over again. I'm busy and I'm sick and I'm whatever it is. I'm sorry, but we're here, and without wasting any more time, because we've got quite a bit to get through. Let's just get back to the Jameson raid and see if we can try and wrap up this segment of early Rhodesian history. Just to recap very quickly, Willoughby had put in an attack at Kruger's Dorp. He wasn't successful in dislodging the Boers along Remshoogte, so he had to swing right, travel south, and he fought another engagement later on in the afternoon. We won't go over that again, but it was a little bit of a complete misunderstanding on his part, and it resulted in him having to do an even quicker retreat to recover his ammunition wagons and continue southwards. But eventually they stopped. They found a depression on the side of the road and settled down there for the night. It was raining on and off, bitterly cold. Frank Thatcher, whom you may remember as the man that I mentioned quite early on in the series, when the column first crossed the frontier, and they arrived at a little town called Otto's Hoop, and there they found a man, a miner, who had come into the country and with the dream of making a fortune there in gold mining, and he no sooner sunk a shaft when the thing flooded up, and that was the end of all his ambitions of making money there. So they came across this poor man, and he was really down on his bones, not knowing what he was going to do. And they said to him, "Yeah, you look like a military man." And he said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I am. I'm an ex-army officer. I held the rank of captain." So they said, "Well, would you like to join us? We'll make a position for you. You can be Colonel Willoughby's aide-de-camp." So he said, "Well, thank you very much." So they gave him a horse and a rifle. Couldn't give him a uniform. They didn't have that. They weren't on a recruiting drive. So Frank says, "Oh, that was a bitterly cold night." He said, "My hands were frozen." He said, "And the Boers kept shooting at us right through the night." He said there was a little bit of a lull about 11 o'clock. Then it started up again. He said, "You couldn't sleep. We were supposed to, lie down and try and get a bit of rest. You can't sleep when you're expecting a bullet in your chest any minute." And he says, men were dropping. They killed 2 and a number of horses in the dark by aiming at the lantern that was hanging in the ambulance wagon. So he said it was a terrible night. But it was a very bad night for Uncle Paul as well. But under different circumstances, clearly. He was in Pretoria, but he was very worried. And you see, he had 2 big problems facing him. Jameson was one, and then there was the Johannesburgers there, the Reform Committee, who, by all accounts, looked ready to start a rebellion and were not just in the mood for it, but who had the means for it. And he just needed to try and get a little bit more information. So that afternoon, he had asked a friend of his by the name of Sammy Marks. I wish I had the time to talk to you about Sammy, but I haven't. If I stop every time I throw out a name, and then tell you a little bit about that person, we'll never get finished. And it's probably part of the reason why this series is going on so long. But if you're interested in South African history, do yourself a favor, just go onto YouTube and you'll find a nice little documentary there about Sammy Marks. And all the things that I would have liked to have told you about him are in that movie. So, and it's got a very easy title too. I think it's called The Life of Sammy Marks. All right, so Uncle Paul and Sammy are very good friends, really. So Uncle Paul says to him, Sammy, you got buddies there in Joburg, haven't you, amongst the Reform Committee? Don't you want to ease your way down there? Just try and sound them out, you know. I need to try and find out what sort of firepower am I facing if I try and sort that problem out in Joburg. And come back and let me know, please. So Sammy goes on down to Joburg, and he walks into the Goldfields building, and there he meets John Hayes Hammond. So Sammy says, they're saying you've got 30,000 rifles at your disposal and 30 cannons. So Hayes Hammond thinks to himself, how can I find a diplomatic way out of this man's questioning? So he says, is that really what they're saying, Sammy? So Sammy thinks, no, man, this guy's dodging my questions. I'm getting nowhere. So after a while, he finds some excuse to say goodbye and he clears off. So Uncle Paul says, what did you find out, Sammy? He said, man, I don't know. You know, as far as we all believe, there's 20,000 rifles there, and we don't know how many cannon. He said, but I put it to Hayes Hammond that he's got 30,000 rifles and 30 field pieces. Uncle Paul, he didn't dispute it. So now Uncle Paul has got that on his mind. So he's worried. And folk notice this. You know, he's had his horse saddled up. He's got his rifle out. He's checked the ammo in his bandolier. What's wrong, Uncle Paul? He said, you know, if ever there was a time for the Uitlanders to attack us, it would be tonight. And I'm just making sure that if they've got any ideas of marching on to Pretoria this evening, so I want to be ready. So someone sends a message to Judge Kotze. So the good judge comes along and he spends the night there at Uncle Paul's home. Now, I can't help thinking that surely Uncle Paul must be having a sense of, you know, déjà vu in all these things that are going on around him. You see, not many years prior to that, Uncle Paul wasn't the president then, but he was a very senior commandant. And the man who was the president at that time was a chap by the name of Martinus Pretorius. You got the Transvaal, which is a Boer republic, and then you've got the Orange Free State to the south, which is also under Boer control. Martinus Pretorius says to Uncle Paul, I think we ought to invade there. We ought to take over that part of South Africa. But now they needed some sort of a reason for invading the Orange Free State. And what they decided on was the dissatisfaction of some of the burghers there. That's the citizens, if you like, the Boer citizens of that country. And it was a genuine complaint. There were people who were very unhappy and dissatisfied at the way certain things were going there. So they, Martinus and Uncle Paul decides, well, we'll say we've come to, you know, to help these people and sort out the problems that they're having there. But the only thing that bothers them is that the Free Staters seem to be a little bit more powerful than the Transvaalers. So that won't do. They don't want to go down there and have a punch-up and find that they get the worst end of the stick. So they go to an African chief by the name of Moshesh. And they say to him, we want to talk to you and we want to form a pact with you, like a treaty, an agreement. So the thing is this, Mushesh, we want to walk into the Orange Free State from the Transvaal, okay? But we need your help. Throw in your lot with us, it's going to be to your advantage, to change things there in that country. So Mushesh thinks about this, and eventually he kind of agrees, and he says goodbye, and they head off back to where they came from, quite happy with the idea that now we've got a warrior force with us, and plus our commandos. Free State hasn't got a hope. But Mushesh is he's not exactly stupid, and he sits there and he thinks about this, and he decides in the end, I'm not getting involved in this trouble between these whiteys here. I think I'm going to just keep out of it, and me and my warriors will stay here and leave them to it. So he reneges on the deal. Nevertheless, Pretorius and Uncle Paul, they cross the frontier on the designated day, and they start moving into the Free State. It's a real invasion, and they've got their troops with them, the commando. They get as far as a place called the Renoster Rivier, and there they are brought up to a halt, because they are, confronted by a very, very strong Free State commando. And these guys mean business. You can see them sitting on their horses, and they just itching to pull their triggers. They don't want, as it were, foreigners mixing into their affairs. So there's no Mushesh to help out here, and Kruger looks at this lot, and then the word comes from somebody behind that there's another commando moving up behind them. So they're like caught in a sandwich. And for 3 hours, these Boers all sit and stare at each other until eventually Martinus Pretorius says to Uncle Paul, my broer, have you perhaps got a white flag in your pocket there? Because if you have, I think now would be a good time to, for you to walk over there and have a chat with those people. See if you can find some way that we can just turn around and leave here without any blood being shed. And Kruger has to do this. So he goes across with a surrender flag, and they are all Boers, they talk the same language, they got the same culture, they understand each other, and they sort the thing out. So Kruger goes back with his president into the Transvaal, and they leave the Free State alone. So I'm wondering now, what would Kruger be thinking now? Here is Jameson, who's come into the Transvaal, ironically so, for the same reason. Citizens that are not happy in Johannesburg. So he's come to help them. But Uncle Paul, had to surrender. He couldn't achieve his goals. So he's thinking to himself, no doubt, if I can get the same thing from Jameson tomorrow, it's going to really help a lot, because if I can deal with that, then I can turn my attention onto Joburg after that. But what will Jameson do? Is he going to continue south? Is he going to swing west? He'll have to. If his intention is to go to Johannesburg, he can't keep going south forever. Or is he going to head east, get back to the frontier? Maybe he's going to, give up and just get what fodder and what food he can from farmhouses on the way back home. Or will he turn around and have another go at attacking Krugersdorp? Nobody knows at that time. In fact, the Reform Committee in Joburg, they're not too sure either about what's going on. They know that there's been a punch-up. Some reports have come through, but as to Jameson's state and where he exactly is, they got no idea. You see, the two cyclists that they sent off were captured on the way back, so there's no information from them. But that afternoon they also had another visitor. Sammy wasn't the only one who arrived there. There was a man from the British agent in Pretoria, and he's got a communication there from the High Commissioner, Sir Hercules Robinson. And this has got to be delivered in person. Johannesburg is running itself at that point. So the messenger doesn't want to just bumble through the defense lines that are around the city there. So he's come to ask permission, can he have a pass from them as well? So he's come just at the right moment, and they say to him, by all means, we'll do that. But we would also like to send somebody to speak to Dr. Jameson, and this man can accompany you. So from amongst their number, they select John Dale Lace. Now, you may remember the name. I spoke about his wife a couple of episodes ago, Josephine Dale Lace. Was that she had a little sort of a little sub-platoon, if you like, a little squad of buglers. So in the morning, if she was going to go to town, go and do a shopping or visit friends or whatever, they would form up on the veranda outside the house, and as she stepped through the front door, they would raise their bugles to their lips, and they would blow a fanfare. And everybody in Johannesburg within earshot would know, oh, Josephine's left the building. And the same in the afternoon, there'd be somebody appointed to look out for her return, and when they saw her coming, the men would quickly form up and then announce her arrival with another fanfare. Well, this was her husband, John Dale Lace. He's told, John, go along there and make Jameson understand that we're in a very bad position here in Joburg. If he persists in pushing his way here into Johannesburg, we don't know what is going to be the end of the story. We're certainly going to come and attack ourselves, and we are in no position to defend the city. See, they haven't got 20,000 rifles. They maybe got about 2,000. That seems to be a good, accurate estimate of how many arms were smuggled in by the British South Africa Company. So 2,000 rifles is not an awful lot. And as far as ammunition goes, they wouldn't be able to sustain an engagement for more than an hour or two, and then the ammunition that they had would be finished. So they don't want to get into a serious fight with the Boers by any means. And if Jameson would just turn around and go away, it would help a lot. So Dale Lace is told, please just make this clear to him. He must turn around and retreat, like the High Commissioner wants him to. So, of course, this is not how everybody that's involved with the committee sees this. Andrew Trimble is, he thinks they're a bunch of clowns. And he says over and over again, you're wasting your time. Why are you trying to appease Kruger and the Boers? You're going to get nowhere. All they're going to give you is promises, promises, promises. They're going to build your hopes up. We're going to have these reforms. We're going to give you these concessions. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And in the end, they do nothing. When you ask them, they say they're working on it. And in the meantime, they're just keeping you exactly where they want you. You want to deal with these people, you've got to deal with them from a position of strength. So stop this, bowing down to them and agreeing to everything that they say. Just get on with it, and let's get this rebellion on the go. And he wasn't the only one who thought like that. There was a colonel there, Bettington, He had a very nice little force of 100 men, and you might call them professionals under the circumstances. They were well-trained men, beautifully kitted out, well paid, and they had state-of-the-art weapons and plenty of ammunition, and a real handy little group of men. But the committee wasn't exactly sure what to do with them. So in their mind, the main priority was the defense of Johannesburg, which is fair enough. And so Bettington would be told, okay, go up to the northern limits of the town and keep an eye on the Boers there. So he'd do that. But what he wants to do is he wants to ride out and meet Jameson. No, you can't do that, because we have an agreement, an armistice, if you like, they used to call it. They called it an armistice with the Boer government. But it wasn't anything like that. The Boers never saw it as an armistice. They had just said to the committee, if you don't make trouble, we won't make trouble. You know, so we both just get on with our lives, as it were. You behave, we won't take any action against you. And the committee trusted this. So any talk of any action against the Boers, the committee nipped it in the bud. So Bettington was told, zip your beak, follow orders. And then somebody on the committee would get the bright idea, oh, what about the wagons that we sent to Pretoria when we thought we were going to have a rebellion and go and bring all the ammunition back here? Those wagons are stuck on the road to Irene. Colonel Bettington, take your men there quickly. Forget about the northern limits of the town. Get down there and get hold of those wagons and escort them back here post haste. It's absolutely crucial they don't fall into the hands of the Boers. So then he'd go off there. And he'd no sooner get there when another messenger would come hurrying up and say, Colonel, leave that alone. We've just had information that the drifts to the south are being attacked by the Boers. You better go there and see what's going on. So then he goes off there with his men. So all Bettington did, and it was a bit of a joke in Johannesburg, because you'd see his men riding this way, then they ride that way, then they ride this way. It was just working on his nerves. And you know what they say in the army, don't you? Order, counter order, disorder, right? And this is what this poor man was facing all the time. So he went to Frank Rhodes. Now, Colonel Frank Rhodes was the brother of Cecil John Rhodes, and he was a very prominent member of that committee. And he said, Frank, I can't take this any longer. You know, they're chasing me from pillar to post, and I'm not achieving anything. I think I should be with Jameson. You know, please, can't you overrule these people and just tell me to go? Now, this was during the night. And Frank says to him, Colonel, look, I tell you what, a report came through earlier on this evening that there's star shells being fired in the east. Right, that's your assignment. Go there, see what's going on. You know, we're going to pretend now that this is a legitimate reason. If anybody asks Frank, he can say, well, I had to send them out there because, you know, it was a report that came in, and they'll keep on coming in until we give them an answer. So, and then he sort of says, Colonel, once you're out there, look around, see if you can find out where Jameson is. And if he if he needs help, please assist him. Well, of course he needs help, man. So off the colonel goes, and he's happy. So yeah, this is all taking place there in the Goldfields building that night. Over in Krugersdorp, a lady who owned a hotel called Varley's Hotel, she didn't have any sleep either. She brought her staff in early, and they were preparing 600 breakfasts for Jameson and his men. And they had every confidence. They'd heard all the noise in the previous afternoon and the shooting, and you know, then it died down, and but she knew Jameson would turn around and she'd have the breakfast ready for him. But in Joburg as well, the Reform Committee, when they were still like keen to have a rebellion and very happy to have Jameson there to assist them in this, had set up a camp at the Robinson mine. They had brought in, dining tables and beds and everything. They had it was like a military base there at that mine. And the fellow in charge of it was a man by the name of Carrie Davis. And Carrie Davis was also looking out for Jameson, and he expected him to be riding into Joburg. So he'd got instructions from the Reform Committee, have enough food, bread, meat cut up, and beer. Make sure you've got a good supply for the guys. They're going to be thirsty when they come in. And later on, he heard, you better get some medical supplies as well, and get lots of bandages and things, because we think it might not be going so well. So he's up in the gearhead of the mine, been there the whole night looking over the dark countryside. And, he's also seen those star shells going off. And he's quite upset as well, because the previous afternoon he had gone twice to Goldfields Building and he'd spoken to the Reform Committee. And he said, guys, I've got everything ready at the camp, but I've also got 150 armed, mounted Australians who will ride with me now to go and help Jameson. Please give me your permission, let me go. And they said, you can't go. Twice he asked, twice they turned him down. And he had to go back to his men and say, sorry, mates, we can't go. They won't give us permission. So, yeah, we had Bettington with 100 men, Carrie Davis with 150 men, and the committee itself had issued 2,000 rifles in the town there. They could have got quite a few people together. And, if they had it would have caused such a disruption if they had struck at the rear of the Boer lines. It would have given Willoughby just that advantage that he needed to get through. It would have made an enormous difference. But what about back at the column in the Depression? Well, the men have been told to try and get some sleep in the rain and in the sporadic rifle fire that keeps going on. Not just rifle fire, Maxims as well. But fortunately, whoever was manning the Boer Maxims, was firing them far too high. The rounds were just flying over the camp and nobody was worrying about the chattering of the Maxims. But there was a council of war being held. So we had the two colonels, that's Colonel Bobby White and his brother Harry White, Raleigh Gray, Jameson, and Colonel Willoughby. So, okay, the men could sit down. There's no food for them, no fodder for the horses. That's all been used up. But at least they're trying to get some sleep. There's nothing like that for the men who are in overall command, even though they are just as tired and just as cold and just as hungry. They've got to try and keep their minds alert, and they've got to try and figure out, what are we going to do tomorrow when the sun comes up? What are we going to do? We must have a plan. Well, they can't stay in that depression. The Boers will cut them to shreds. So, daylight, about 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's agreed that 3:30, the men must be roused. But now Willoughby wants to keep his options open because he doesn't know what he's going to meet tomorrow. So if something goes wrong, he wants to be able to put a plan B into operation. But in order to make plans A, B, C, D, and so on, he's got to have information. He's got to know what's going on. Where's the enemy? Are they static or are they moving? In which direction are they moving? So he needs his scouts out there gathering this kind of intelligence for him. but he hasn't got enough scouts. It's evident from the things that take place after that. So, excuse me. One thing with Rhodesians, you are expected to rise to the occasion, if I can put it that way. You know, we were raised in a way that we weren't taught that this is your job and this is your job and this is your job. Yes, companies may be organized like that, but if something goes wrong, you're not supposed to use that as an excuse. You know, our culture doesn't allow that kind of thing. So, you know, the idea being, if you're in a boat and there's water coming in and it's sinking, you can't just sit and look at the water coming in and say, well, you know, it's above my pay scale, or whatever it is. I haven't been told that I must do something about that. You just jump in. So people who are like normal troopers in that column, that night they found themselves being reassigned to other duties, mostly involved with scouting. So in this way, Willoughby figured he had enough people to gather information for him. So one of the first people who found himself in a situation where he had to do a job that really wasn't his was the group's bugler, a fellow by the name of Trooper Valet. So Valet was woken up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was told, listen, we want you to try and get through to Johannesburg tonight, okay? When we finish talking to you, select what you think is the best horse amongst, and it doesn't matter who it belongs to, you just tell them you're going to take it. Get the best horse, get on it, find your way through the Boer lines, get to Joburg, and deliver a message to the Reform Committee there. Okay, we're not going to write it down in case the Boers capture you, so you're going to have to memorize it. And this is the message. Tell them that Dr. Jameson says, I am getting on all right, but you must send out men to meet me. Have you got that, trooper? Yes, sir. All right, on your way and good luck. So here's a guy who's usually a musician, shall we say. He's the trumpeter, and he's relieved of that duty, and now he's given the task that you'd give somebody in the SAS today, I suppose. You know, he's got to find his way through the Boer lines, and it's dark, and it's a strange countryside. You don't know exactly where you are, but he tackles the job and he goes. And in the meantime, Bettington is coming in the opposite direction from Johannesburg, and he's heading out in the direction of Jameson's column. And lo and behold, here he meets Bugler Valley standing on his feet in the middle of the road with his horse collapsed beside him. So, you know, as soon as they finished making the introductions in the dark over there, so everybody knows who's who, he says to them, you know, I've got an important message I must get through to the Reform Committee, but this is supposed to be the best horse, but I think I galloped him too hard and he's collapsed. I'm stuck. I've got no way of getting to Joburg. So while they're still there having this conversation, they hear hoofbeats coming up the road from the direction of Johannesburg. And then somebody calls out from the back of the force, it's Sandilands. Now, Mr. Sandilands is the secretary of the Reform Committee. And Colonel Bettington just goes, because he knows what's coming. There's going to be another order now. He's not going to meet up with Jameson. So one of the men standing next to him says, shall I shoot his horse when he gets closer? You know, and then we'll just gap it. And, you know, by the time he walks back to Joburg, you know, we'll have been with Jameson and it'll all be forgotten, and we can just say, well, we never got a message from him. So the colonel says, no, we can't do that. We better just wait and hear what he says. So Sandilands comes along. Now, you can't go out there. We're expecting an attack and you'll be briefed back at Goldfields building. So we turn around, it'll all go back again. Dear me. So they do that. When Trooper Valet gets to the committee room there and he stands before them, they are very interested in what he has to say. I mean, this is the first real sort of, if I can put it that way, direct contact that they've had now with this invading force. Up until then, it's just been, you know, stories and reports, and so-and-so went there and they saw this, and, you know, and somebody heard something else. But now here's a guy from the force itself. So they said, why are you here? And he says, I've been sent to give you a message. Good. What does the message say? It's from Dr. Jameson. He says, I'm getting on all right, but you must send out men to meet me. Yeah? What does that mean? Well, it means I'm getting on all right, and you must send out men to meet me, sir. Yeah, but didn't he say anything else? No, he didn't. Well, we don't know what that means. Oh, Frank Rhodes has had enough now. For goodness sakes, you know, he can hardly bite his tongue. He says, obviously the good doctor's in trouble. I mean, why would he send a man out in the middle of the night to risk his life, getting through the Boer lines, and he's all right? He's not all right. That's what he's trying to tell you. Well, we can't do anything. You know, we've gone over this before. Our hands are tied, Frank. You know, if we give Jameson any help, we're going to be in trouble. The Boers will have every reason to attack us. We're giving them the excuse. We can't do anything. So Colonel Bettington with these men are sent northwest to go and protect Johannesburg in case there's any attack from that direction. And he's really angry, eh? But anyway, there's nothing he can do. I don't know what happened to Trooper Valet. I would like to think that maybe Josephine Daylace gave him a job and put him with her buglers. That would be a nice end to the story, but I don't know. Don't know what happened. In the roll, he's listed as escaped. So yeah. Anyway, it starts getting toward dawn, and preparations are made. Men are quietly roused up, and the rain is still falling on and off. And as Frank said, it's so cold, guys could, you know, hardly move their fingers. So Willoughby sends out scouts in every direction except northwards, because I mean they know that's their rear, and they know that the Boers are there in force. There's no point in sending anybody there to find out if there's Boers. And likewise to the east, they know that, you know, all routes to Johannesburg are being cut off, so they can't easily push that way. But it is well to check just in case the Boers have moved during the night for some reason or other, and there may be a gap there big enough for the force to slip through. And westwards, well, they'll check it out in any case, but they don't expect that there's any enemy there. And south, of course, is the way that they've been going, so they're very keen to know what's to the south. So the scouts go out. They haven't been gone very long when there's the sound of gunfire here and the sound of gunfire there, everywhere. And the scouts are driven back, except from the southern direction. That's fine. Those scouts come back eventually to say, we can't see any enemy. The way is still clear. We can go south. We can keep pushing southwards. So westward is out, eastward is out for the moment, and northward is certainly, there's no ways going north. So now, depending on what cavalry regiment you would be looking at in those days, or what regiment that has mounted infantry, you would find that the orders for a march are different. It's typically about an hour's segments. Okay, so the march is divided up into, on the hour you would stop. So normally, if the horses have been unsaddled when you start off, it would be a walk march. In other words, you'd walk the horse for maybe minutes, stop, check all the tackle, make sure the girth is properly tight, stirrups are the right heights, and everything else that horse people do. And then you'd carry on for another 10 minutes. Then canter perhaps for 20 minutes. And then dismount and lead the horse for the remaining 20 minutes of the hour. It, as I said, it varies from regiment to regiment, and but you get the idea. There is some sort of a routine. There's a cycle that they repeat. But now this morning there'd be nothing like that. There'd be no walk march to begin the movement. They're in a depression. On the southern end of the depression, the ground falls away gently southward into the early morning darkness. So what Willoughby does is he takes the rear guard and he divides them into two. So half of the men position themselves on the rim of this depression, and they're in the prone position, watching for any movement from the Boers to the rear. The other half of the rear guard joins the column, and the column sets off at a fast trot. And the command is given, off they go. So after a few hundred meters, when the terrain is favorable, the second line of the rear guard stop. They dismount and they wait. Now, of course, the Boers are aware of the fact. They can see in the dim morning light that the column is now moving. So they don't want the column to get too far ahead, so they start moving forward as well. But of course they get stopped by the first row of the rear guard opening fire on them, so they take cover again and go to ground. The first line then, when they see that the second line is in position, they mount up and then gallop through the ranks of the second line and join up with the main column and stay with them until they find some suitable terrain where they again can stop, and then this thing repeats itself. So I think you've got some idea. There's this leapfrogging of one line to the other, and in this way they keep the Boers at a distance of about 400 to 500 yards from the back of the column. I wish I could explain it better. You know, I'm sure that there are military terms for this kind of thing, and if I said that, you would know immediately what I'm talking about. So if there are any experts who want to help out in the comments, please do. But I hope I haven't confused you too much, you know. But anyway, it was quite a common way of covering your withdrawal. Yeah. So they are hoping that this open ground in front of them will continue, because as the light gets better, so the fire from the enemy is becoming more intense and more accurate. So the Boers are on high ground. There's a railway embankment, and they're firing from that, and then thankfully the gunfire from that stops, but they still able to keep harrying the raiders. Frank said it's terrible. He said, I had one horse shot out from underneath me. This is thank fracture now. He said, I nearly fell off the horse. I fell asleep on the horse, even though they were firing bullets at me. He said, and you don't see them. You don't. It's just like a puff of smoke from behind a clump of rocks, and then you hear bullets flying, and then everybody fires back at it. And he said you know, the lichen that grows on the rocks, the vegetation and so on. And he said Rhodesian bullets were just blasting that off, you know, sort of like sweeping it off the surface of the rock, and just white rock underneath it. But the Boers on the other side, and you know, he's quite safe. He's not going to get hit in anything. No bullet's going to go through a rock or boulder that size. So he said, this is the sort of thing. We're fighting with ghosts all the way. So this continues down to a little place called Ron Fontaine. Now, it's a sort of mining settlement there, and there's small holdings around it, and houses and so on, rather scattered, and people live there and they work there. They've been hearing this gunfire from early morning, and it's been getting closer and closer and closer, and they know what's going on. They know there's a running battle going on between the Boers and Jameson. So when Jameson approaches this settlement, he stops there briefly because he needs to sort out, there's some problem with the guides. He had 2 guides the previous day. They've disappeared somehow. For some reason, nobody can find them. And he's looking for a guide amongst these people. Yeah, and there's a lot of people that have come out. And I've got to tell you that the support is not with the Boers. The support is with the Rhodesians. And the men are clamoring to join up the column. And they've got one big complaint. Why haven't we been issued with rifles? We understand that people in Johannesburg were issued with rifles. Surely they could have put a pile of rifles on a wagon and brought it out here and you know, and armed us. We could be with you now. But you know, there's no point in taking a lot of unarmed men along with you, and you know, Willoughby had to point this out to them. But certainly they were ever so willing to join up with him. So they leave Ron Fontaine, and you know, they can't keep going south. They've got to start moving to the east now. And the guide tells them that there is a way. You're going to sort of like make a left hook, and then there are a few hills, he says. There's one hill called Doornkop. Once we get past Doornkop, from there to Joburg, the road is pretty easy. You know, there's be no problems there. But that's, you just got to get there and get over that objective. Willoughby selects 2 troopers, and he has the African Wranglers cut out 250 of the spare horses. It's becoming too much to handle. They're nearly in Joburg, and you know, it's just adding to the administration of this whole column is this spare horses. So these 2 men are told to go south and later on find their way to Joburg, you know, when the hoo-ha has calmed down. So off they go with the Black Wranglers, 250 horses and the 2 troopers. Unfortunately, they get to a place called Blaubank, which is the name of a farm, and there they are surrounded by Boers there, and these horses are captured, and the 2 troopers, and the Africans as well. But something else happens at Blaubank, and I'm reluctant to talk about it, but I have to, because you know, we must tell the story in its fullest sense, as best as we understand it, and from the information that we have available. Now, I said that Willoughby had taken men and put them onto jobs that weren't the sort of thing that they normally did. And he had taken a trooper by the name of Black out of A Troop and sent him southwards on a scouting mission on his own. So, I mean, Valley must have had some really good skills, apart from blowing the bugle, for them to have chosen him. And I dare say that Trooper Black also had certain skills and abilities that made them think, this is the guy, we can send him out on his own and he can go and gather intelligence for us. I don't know what it was with Trooper Black. Maybe he was tired. Remember, he hadn't eaten since the day before. Probably didn't have any sleep that night. He'd been involved in a real heavy punch-up there at Remshoogte the previous afternoon. So perhaps he was a little bit inattentive, I don't know. But he got caught, got captured by some Boers. And they took him to the farmhouse at Blaubank. And the lady of the house tells us what happened there. She said they started beating him up. And eventually she couldn't take it anymore and she intervened. And she said by this time, half of his face had been caved in, the way that somebody had hit him with a rifle butt. And she gave him some water and tried to, you know, comfort him a little bit. But he was in terrible pain. And then they stopped beating him and then they were talking amongst themselves. But Black was listening with one ear. And he knew enough of what they were saying to understand what their plans were. And he rose to his feet and tore his shirt off, she says, tore it off and started yelling at them. And he said, "Here's my heart. It's in the right place. My heart is not in my back. If you want to kill me, stand in front of me. Yeah, yeah, shoot me, yeah." So they said, "Get on your horse, we're finished with you." So, I mean, what can he do? So he gets on the horse, and one of the Boers takes a rifle, and he gives it to a so-called coloured man by the name of Graham, a man of mixed blood. And he says, "Graham." So as Black starts walking the horse out of the farmyard, Graham nails him from behind, shoots him in the back, kills him, falls off the horse. His body is taken and it's buried in the sort of family cemetery there at Blaubank. And that wasn't the only atrocity committed that day. After the battle had taken place, you know, people came from all over, very curious. I mean, it's not every day that a battle happens and you can go there and see who's been captured and see dead bodies lying around and all the rest of it. Human nature being what it is, they're very curious. So there was one fellow, he had nothing to do with the raiders, he had nothing to do with the Boers. He was just somebody came to visit the battle site. And one of the commandants, senior commandant, saw him and indicated to his men, "Arrest that guy, bring him to me." So he stood before the commandant and he said, "No, I've got nothing to do with Jameson. I'm from Joburg. I've just come to look and see what's happened here." So they tied his wrists together with a leather thong and then secured him to the commandant's saddle. And that man climbed on his horse and rode it as hard as he could for some distance, dragging this man behind him. I mean, his feet couldn't keep up with the horse. And they stopped and cut him loose. And then the commandant said to him, "You know, I think I believe you. I'm going to let you go. But we play a game first, all right? Do you see that wagon over there? Okay. I'm going to give you a good start. And you run, and if you can get there before I get there, I'll let you go. You know, I've got no use, no need to detain you any further. How about it? Let's have a bit of fun." The guy says, "I'm not moving." "What do you mean you're not moving?" I said, "I'm not moving because I know you're going to shoot me as an escapee. I'm not." So the commandant takes the stirrup off his saddle. You know what a stirrup is, eh? Quite a heavy piece of metal. Takes it and he beats this man about the head till he's senseless. They throw him in a prison cell, I think for 2 weeks, I think it was. They open the door one day and they say, "Right, on your way, footsack. You know, we're not keeping you any longer." Shocking. Terrible. Let me just hasten to say this is not typical. This is not typical Boer behavior. And I'm glad that later on I'll be able to give you a little bit more of the other side of Boer nature. Okay, but it's sad, and it happened. So they are now swinging to the east, and they're looking forward to getting to Doornkop, getting past Doornkop, and then being able to heave a bit of a sigh of relief, and then it's just a short gallop into town. So they have to stop every now and then just to check where they are, the column, and give the horses a little bit of a breather, and then set off again at a quick trot. And they stop. Raleigh Grey gets off his horse and walks across to say something to Jameson, and thud, a bullet hits him in the foot. The man doesn't say a word. He just turns around, hobbles back to his horse, remounts, and sits there waiting for instructions. And people look at him, and they look at each other, and they look at his foot. His foot is crushed, but the guy doesn't say a word. So they move off again, and then they are approached. There's a lull in the fighting, and they're approached by a group of Boers. It's an escort of the messenger from Sir Jacobus the Vet, and accompanying him is John Dale Lace. So everybody stops, and the messenger says, "I have a communication from His Excellency," and here it is. So Jameson looks at this, and it's the same old thing. "I've made a proclamation and declared you an outlaw. You're going to be held responsible for your unlawful acts that you've committed in this country. And I've also added to that proclamation the fact that if any person assists you or your men, they will be branded as criminals, and they will have to pay for the consequences of helping you. So you're a criminal, and anybody that helps you is a criminal. So I'm telling you now, for the last time, listen to me, turn your men around, and go back to whence you came from." You can't do anything with that, you know. The man doesn't understand. There's no food, there's no water, there's no fodder, there's nothing back there except death. You've got to try and get through to Joburg. So calls Daylace to one side, and he says, "Okay, what are you here for? Tell me what's going on in Johannesburg." He said, "Well, sir, there's nothing going on in Johannesburg. There are no marauding gangs of Boers riding up and down the streets, killing women and children. As we understand, you are under the impression that that is what is happening, but it's not true. And in fact, you know, you are causing quite a problem for us, and it would be appreciated if you could take heed of Sir Hercules Robinson's instructions to you and retire, please." So Jameson says to him, "What about the troops?" Says, "What troops do you mean, sir?" He says, "The troops. I sent a message back to you saying, yeah, thanks. It would be nice if I could have help. And I sent a bugler as well saying, you must send out men to help me. What's happened with them?" So Daylace looks at him and he says, "Sir, there are no troops. I know nothing about troops, and there was never any intention to send any troops to you." But just then, the Boer escort say, "Look, hey, guys, we can't hold up things much longer. We got to go. Come. Talking's done. Message has been delivered. let's go. So the party goes off and the firing recommences, and Jameson is absolutely shattered. He is so shocked he doesn't even call Willoughby over to share this with him. He can't bring himself to say, John, do you know what I've just heard from the committee? That they never had any intention of helping us by sending men. So he keeps quiet. The column moves forward, and they come to Doornkop. And it's quite heavily, guarded by Boers. So they start shelling this hill. They got their Whitworth cannons, and they by now these Rhodesians are very accomplished artillerymen. I mean, so they've been using these cannons a lot. So they plaster this hill, and when they think that it's okay now, they get ready to charge. 300 men with Charlie Coventry in command. So the order is given, and they gallop across this open ground at the Boers on this hill. Glorious charge, every bit as wonderful as the charge of the Light Brigade. Only these men were tired. The horses were tired, and they're riding through a curtain of lead. The Boers are just throwing it at them, and men are dropping here, they're dropping there, but the charge goes on. Not a horse falters, and they clear the hill. They clear the hill, but it wasn't cheap. Charlie Coventry lies there. He's been wounded. Everybody's convinced it's a mortal wound. They don't even give him any help because they can see he's dead. But after the battle, his body is picked up and taken to Krugersdorp. There are so many wounded and injured there, they have nowhere to treat him, so they put him in a shop window. And he lies there in full view of the passing public. I mean, you can stand on the pavement and look through the window, and there's Charlie Coventry lying there, fighting for his life. And they patch him up, and he survives it. Send him to England. He's granted bail there. He's got to stand trial later on, but he's free for the moment, and he makes his way to his family's estates. And he arrives there in time to attend his own memorial service. And I told you about all this in a previous episode. And a lovely man. So I'm glad to say that he survived that. But many others didn't. And while that's taking place, here on the left is a ridge, which is just covered in Boers. And Inspector Bodel, he takes a couple of troops, and he charges there, and another charge just as wonderful and as glorious as that of Charlie Coventry's. And he clears that ridge. So the Rhodesians did well with their cavalry that day. And, it looked like they might just pull it off. And then they move over this hill that they've taken at such great price. And they find a little flay in front of them with a stream running through, with a farmhouse and an orchard and the wall around the orchard again. They all seem to have that. And it's a nice enough view, but it's spoilt by one thing. Because in the background is this looming great hill. And the real Doornkop is full of Boers. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. I think Willoughby later said that at that stage we were outnumbered thousands to one. There's no way of getting through that. So it looked like they may have come to the end of the road. Jameson kneels down beside the stream, and he cups his hand, and he's drinking some water. But the column is spread out on a very wide front at this point. It's not as though they're all together, you know, fighting shoulder to shoulder. They spread out. And over here on the one flank, Harry White has got some problems over there with some wounded men that he doesn't want to leave them there. He wants to move them. But he doesn't want to do anything until he knows what Willoughby's intentions are. So he sends a sub-inspector, Chawner, and he says to him, please go back to the main body and find out what's got to be done with these wounded men. So Chawner says, as he rides back, and he says that he got closer to this orchard and he could see bullets splattering against the wall. As he gets near the orchard, he hears a galloping horse and he looks up, and a chap comes riding past. He's a supernumerary from the Bechuanaland Border Police, and he's got his lance in a stirrup bucket, and on the end of his lance he's tied a white puggaree. Now a puggaree is a sort of a flimsy cloth that you wrap around your headdress, and the back of it falls like a veil over your neck and stops the sun burning you too much. So he's taken this off, put it on this lance, and he's running with it, riding his horse, drawing everybody's attention to the fact that they've surrendered. And when Jameson sees this, he sits down flat. He almost falls down flat, so much so that his servant, who's nearby, a man by the name of Garlick, says, I thought he'd been hit by a bullet, and I ran forward to help him, you know. And he said, but when I got there, I saw he wasn't injured. He was just so amazed. And nobody gave the order. It's 9:15 in the morning. Nobody has told anybody to surrender. But what can you do? I mean, really the fight was over, especially as in the distance they had seen some black figures moving along a road, and as they got closer they saw the sun, the early morning sun, reflected off long gun barrels. It was the Staats artillery that finally arrived after all this time. They finally came out. Dare I say, they finally left Pretoria and came to join the fight. But it was over. Nevertheless, the minute they were in range, they started lobbing shells at the farmhouse and in the farmyard and in the surrounding ground there. So shells were bursting around them, and Willoughby's Maxims had already packed up. I mean, they were so hot, there was no water to cool them down, and they still scoop water out of the stream for the Maxims. There was no time for that. And, you know, the fight was essentially over. So he said to Jameson, shall I write out a surrender note? So Jameson said, yeah, I think you better do that. So he gets out his writing materials and he scribbles down a note, and he waits for the Boers to come. And Frank Thatcher says they just like come out of the ground, you know, there's like open land all around you and there's bullets flying and that, and then the next minute it's all quiet. I mean, as soon as the guy on the horse rode around, most of the shooting just stopped, except for, I think it was Bobby White on the one flank. Nobody told him about this, so he's just merrily engaging the Boers. He's ready to go all day as long as he's got ammunition. So they had to send a message to him very quickly, you know, Bobby, it's over, stop shooting. So, yeah, you know what, I think let's leave it there. We've got to Doornkop. We've been stopped here at Doornkop. We can't go any further. Next time we meet, we're gonna finish the story. We're gonna be done with Jameson and the raid, and get back to our own country and look at the history over there. So, folks, yeah, thank you very much. I just want to say something. You know, this channel is called 5RR, but there's another channel called 8RR. Yeah, and it's brand new, and it's on YouTube. It's on John Van Zyle's Fighting Men of Rhodesia. So if you're a subscriber there, you may already have seen it. And we're looking forward to a series of stories from ATR perspective. So yeah, go there please, and go and listen, because you know, I've been sort of focusing on Rhodesian history for a little while now, but there the focus is on the Bush War. So you're gonna enjoy that. So I looked at the first episode the other evening, and yeah, please do that. Go ahead and support them, and good luck, John and the team and Callum. You know, I wish you every success. So folks, that's it. Just a quick thank you to all of you again, all the subscribers, all the members, all the patrons. You know, I wish I could meet each one of you, shake your hand, and just spend a bit of time with you and tell you how much it means to me, the support that you give me. It really does. Oh, there's many a month when I've thought, well, sure, you know, petrol money for this month, I don't know what I'm going to do, but you know, $5 will maybe bring in something. And sure enough, it does every month. Thank you, I appreciate it. You know, it's more than I deserve, because I'm quiet for so often, and yet you folks, even though I'm unfaithful, you remain faithful. So I'm very grateful for that. Right, just very quickly, take care of yourselves, keep well, and God bless you all. Bye for now.